The sound of boots on gravel echoed through the training yard. It was one of those mornings when the desert sun had barely risen, but the heat was already pressing down. Dust hung in the air, settling on uniforms, weapons, and skin like a reminder that, hey, nothing was ever clean. Specialist Elena Vargas stood at parade rest, her M4 rifle cradled against her chest. She had earned her weapon, trained with it, slept beside it like it was an extension of her body. To her, the rifle wasn't just metal and polymer. It was security. It was trust. It was proof that she belonged. But to some, Elena still didn't belong. Vargas, Bach Gunnery Sergeant Coulter, his voice carrying over the yard. He was a square-jawed Marine with salt and pepper hair, the kind who thought respect was earned only through blood and bruises. Step forward. Elena obeyed, boots crunching on the grit. The platoon's eyes followed her, a mixture of curiosity and disdain. She already knew what was coming. Coulter held out his hand. Rifle. Her grip tightened. Gunny, permission to ask. Permission denied. Hand it over. The weight of silence pressed in. Slowly, she unhooked the sling and held the weapon out, metal gleaming under the hard sun. Coulter snatched it away like she'd been caught shoplifting. You want to prove yourself, Vargas? He growled loud enough for everyone to hear. You'll do it without this. He held the rifle aloft. Any grunt can pull a trigger, but I want to see if you can fight, think, and survive without leaning on steel. The platoon chuckled. Some outright laughed. Elena's jaw clenched, but she kept her face impassive. She wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Coulter wasn't done. He tossed the rifle to an armorer standing nearby. Lock it up. For the next week, Vargas doesn't get a weapon. Let's see what she's really made of. Her stomach tightened. A week without her rifle meant being treated like dead weight. Weiss. It meant every drill, every simulation, every field exercise would be stacked against her. In combat, an unarmed soldier was a liability. And here, surrounded by skeptics, it was an invitation for humiliation. That night, sitting in the dim barracks, Elena ran her hands over the callus of her palms. She thought of her father, a machinist who had taught her to fight back when the neighborhood boys had cornered her as a kid. Your fists are tools, same as your brain. Never let anyone take them from you. She whispered it to herself like a mantra. They could strip away her rifle, but they couldn't strip away her will. What Elena didn't know was that before the week was over, she wouldn't just prove herself. She would do something no one in that platoon, not even Coulter, could forget. And it wouldn't take a rifle to do it. The test came sooner than anyone expected. 3 days into the punishment, Elena was in the yard when the klaxon blared. A mock alert, the kind used to simulate real-world attacks. Marines scrambled, grabbing rifles, checking magazines, forming fire teams. Elena stood at the edge, empty-handed, watching the swarm of armed men ready themselves. Coulter's voice cut through the chaos. Vargas. Front and center. She jogged forward, sweat already prickling under her uniform. Coulter's eyes were cold steel. Today's exercise is close-quarters combat. Urban scenario. But since you're unarmed, we'll give you a different task. He pointed to a cluster of 5 Marines, all bigger, all armed with training rifles fitted with ammunition. You're going in against them. You've got 7 to 5 seconds to take them down. Rules are simple. You don't get to pick up a rifle. Use whatever else you've got. Laughter rippled through the formation. One of the men, a Bailey corporal named Ricks, smiked. What's she gonna do, Gunny? Throw rocks at us? Coulter didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on Elena, waiting for her to fold. But Elena didn't fold. She gave a short nod. Understood. The mock urban environment was a series of plywood walls and corridors built to resemble a village. Dust and echoes carried in the enclosed space. The 5 Marines filed in, rifles ready, confident grins plastered across their faces. Elena waited outside, heart hammering, going over the layout in her head. She had run this course before, but always with a weapon. Now she had only her training, her speed, and her resolve. A buzzer sounded. She slipped inside. Immediately, gunfire cracked, Simunition round slamming into walls. She dove into cover, dust raining down. Her mind worked fast. Direct confrontation was suicide. She needed to use the environment. Rix rounded the corner, rifle up. Elena burst from her crouch, closing the distance before he could fire. She slammed his weapon aside, driving her elbow into his throat. He gagged, dropped the rifle. She grabbed it, spun it around, and jammed the stock into his gut, but didn't fire. She didn't need to. He was down. One. The others shouted. Boots thundered through the plywood corridors. Elena ditched the rifle, sprinting into the shadows. A second Marine came barreling through an alley. She kicked low, sweeping his legs out from under him, then drove her knee into his chest as he hit the ground. 2. Her lungs burned. The seconds were ticking. She could hear Coulter's voice echo faintly from outside. She's running out of time. A third Marine fired at her from the doorway, round smacking the wall inches from her face. Elena darted forward, sliding under the barrel, and hammered an open palm into his chin. His head snapped back. She grabbed his vest, yanked him off balance, and drove him headfirst into the wall. 3. Pain radiated through her shoulder from the impact, but she ignored it. She could feel the shift now. The laughter outside had gone silent. 2 left. Her ears rang with the countdown in her own head. 20 seconds. She pressed her back against the wall, steadying her breath. The last 2 moved as a team, calling out to each other. Smarter. Cautious. She couldn't take them head-on. She picked up a loose piece of rubble, tossed it across the room. The clatter drew their attention. As they pivoted, Elena sprang from the opposite side, slamming into the first Marine, twisting his rifle away before he could fire. She jammed her shoulder into his ribs, knocking him sprawling. 4. The last Marine whirled, weapon raised, but Elena was already moving. She grabbed his rifle, shoved it upward as it fired harmlessly into the ceiling, then drove her forehead into his nose. Blood sprayed. He collapsed, groaning. 5. The buzzer sounded. 73 seconds. Elena stood there, chest heaving, dust streaking her face. Around her, 5 Marines groaned on the ground, rifles scattered uselessly. Outside, the silence was deafening. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. The next morning, the barracks buzzed with whispers. Marines were not the kind to hand out compliments easily, but even the toughest among them couldn't deny what they had seen the day before. Elena Vargas, the woman stripped of her rifle, mocked as dead weight, had dropped 5 armed men in under 75 seconds, without firing a shot. Some called it luck, others called it dainty fighting. But deep down, every single one of them knew, what she did wasn't luck, it was skill. Elena woke before dawn, sitting quietly on the edge of her bunk, lacing her boots. Her muscles ached from the bruises. Her ribs were tender, her shoulders stiff, her forehead throbbing from where she had headbutted the last Marine. But pain was something she'd made peace with long ago. She walked into the yard where the early risers were doing PT. The moment she stepped out, conversations faltered. Heads turned. A few nodded, just barely, like reluctant respect being paid. Others glared, as if daring her to try something like that again. And then there was Gunnery Sergeant Coulter. He stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight, watching her. No smike, no barked insult. Just silence. That, more than anything, unsettled Elena. After formation, Coulter called her aside. His voice was low, almost private. You think what you did yesterday proved something? She didn't flinch. I proved I don't need a rifle to fight. His eyes narrowed. No. What you proved is that you've been hiding training you weren't supposed to have. Her stomach dropped. Those takedowns, he continued, his tone sharp, aren't standard army combatives. That sweep, that palm strike, the choke reversal, those are special operations techniques. Where'd you learn them? Elena's mouth went dry. She had expected questions, but not this soon. I trained. I learned. Don't give me that, Coulter snapped. That wasn't YouTube brawling. Someone taught you, and I want to know who. She held his gaze, forcing herself to stay calm. With respect, Gunny, I did what you asked. I fought without a rifle. Isn't that enough? His jaw flexed. For a long moment, it seemed like he'd press further. But then he shook his head and walked away. The conversation left Elena rattled. Coulter was sharper than she gave him credit for. And if he dug too deep into her past, he'd uncover truths she couldn't afford to let surface. Because the truth was, before the army, before the platoon, Elena had been trained in ways most soldiers never were. Ways she had sworn to keep buried. That night, she wrote in her battered journal, the one she never let anyone see. She wrote not about Coulter, or the stairs, but about her brother, Miguel. Miguel had been the reason she enlisted. He was 2 years older, a Marine who had deployed twice before dying in a dusty Afghan village that no map seemed to remember. The official story was that insurgents ambushed his squad, but Elena had always suspected something else, something buried in classified reports. Every fight, every bruise, every mission wasn't just about proving herself. It was about him, carrying the weight he'd left behind. But now, with Coulter watching her every move, she feared her past was clawing its way to the surface. And if it did, she wouldn't be the only one paying the price. The following week, the platoon was sent out for a field exercise, a 48-hour mission simulating hostile territory. It was meant to test endurance, navigation, and coordination under stress. The squad moved through rocky terrain, packs heavy, rifles at the ready. Elena trudged silently with the rest, sweat stinging her eyes, unarmed and untrusted. Coulter stayed close, his eyes always flicking her way. It was like he was waiting for her to slip. On the second night, as the squad bedded down in the brush, Coulter gave her a new order. "Vargas, you on point for night recon." The words made several Marines snap their heads up. Recon, at night, without a weapon. It was practically a death sentence, even in a training exercise. "Rix," the corporal she'd dropped in the challenge, scoffed. "Gunny, you can't be serious. She'll get tagged in 5 minutes." "That's the point," Coulter said evenly. His gaze didn't waver from Elena. "We'll see if her luck holds." Elena said nothing, though her pulse quickened. She pulled on her NVGs, adjusted her pack straps, and set off into the darkness. The training zone wasn't empty tonight. Other squads were playing opposition forces, hunting them with simunition rifles and night vision. Every shadow could be an enemy. She moved low, breathing slow, senses tuned to every rustle and shift in the night. Minutes stretched into an hour. She mapped terrain in her head, counting steps, marking sound cues. Then movement. A pair of enemy Marines, sweeping through the trees ahead. Rifles ready. She couldn't engage directly. She had no weapon. So she improvised. Slipping low, she scooped a fist-sized rock from the date. She hurled it far to the right. The noise cracked through the dark. The 2 Marines swung their rifles, moving toward the sound. Silent, Elena slipped behind them. She surged forward, driving her forearm into the first Marine's throat, slamming him into the ground before he could shout. The second spun, eyes wide. She lunged, ripping the rifle from his hands and jamming the butt into his chest. He hit the date, gasping. 2 enemies down. Her chest heaved, adrenaline burning through her veins. This wasn't luck. It was survival. By dawn, she returned to camp with intel markers from 3 opposition outposts, more than anyone expected. She dropped the pouch at Coulter's feet. "Recon complete, Gunny." The platoon stared in disbelief, some with grudging respect, others with faith. But Coulter only stared at her, hard and unreadable. Later, when the others slept, he pulled her aside. His voice was quiet, dangerous. "You're hiding something, Vargas. Something bigger than training. No soldier does what you just did without a history." She met his stare, her face stone. "With respect, Gunny, maybe it's not about history. Maybe it's just about refusing to quit." But deep inside, Elena knew the truth. This wasn't over. If Coulter pushed harder, if he dug deep enough, he'd uncover the shadows she had spent years running from, the ones tied not only to her training, but to the night her brother died. And once that secret came out, nothing in her platoon, or her life, would ever be the same. The platoon returned from the field exercise battered, bruised, and silent. What Elena had accomplished on night recon hung heavy in the air. For the first time, the others didn't openly mock her. But respect wasn't offered either, only wariness. She had become an unknown variable, unpredictable and dangerous in ways they couldn't explain. That night, as the others ate in the mess, Elena sat alone at the far corner. She chewed mechanically, her mind far from the chow hall's chatter. Miguel's face kept surfacing. Her brother's laugh, the way he used to sling an arm around her shoulders and whisper, "You're stronger than they think, Lena. Stronger than you even know." He had believed in her when no one else did. And then he was gone, dead in a nameless Afghan valley. The official report called it an ambush. But Elena had seen the redacted documents, the blacked-out lines that hinted at something more. Something Miguel had been ordered to do. She clenched her fork until her knuckles whitened. The same techniques Coulter was suspicious of. Miguel had taught her some of them during his leaves. But the deeper knowledge, the fluid way she dismantled opponents, came later, after his death. It came from someone Miguel had trusted, someone who had approached her at his funeral with no insignia, no name, only a quiet warning. Your brother wasn't supposed to die that night. If you want answers, you'll need to be ready. Train. Learn. And when the time comes, act. That stranger had disappeared. But he left her with enough knowledge, of hand-to-hand, of unconventional tactics, that she had walked into the army already sharper than most recruits. And now Coulter was circling like a wolf, sensing her hidden teeth. The next morning, Elena was summoned to the company's office. She walked in, back straight, face calm, but her pulse pounded. Inside sat Captain Reeves, stern and steady, and beside him, Gunnery Sergeant Coulter. "Vargas," Reeves said evenly, "you've been the subject of some discussion." Her chest tightened. Reeves tapped a folder on his desk. "You came in as a late transfer, correct?" "Yes, sir." He opened the file. "Your prior unit listed you as competent, disciplined, but nothing extraordinary. And yet, in just weeks here, you've displayed skills far beyond standard infantry." Coulter leaned forward, his voice sharp. "She's hiding something. I want to know what." Elena kept her expression neutral. "With respect, sir, I do what's required. Nothing more." Reeves studied her, his eyes sharp. For a moment, she feared he'd see straight through her. But then he closed the file and leaned back. "Regardless of your past, your present results are undeniable. We have an upcoming joint training exercise with SEAL Team 9. They'll need support. You'll be attached." Elena's stomach dropped. SEALs. The sharpest eyes, the toughest operators, men who would instantly recognize the patterns in her fighting, the language of her movement. "Sir," she began, but Reeves cut her off. "This isn't optional." Dismissed. Coulter's smirk followed her out the door. That night, as she lay in her bunk, Elena whispered Miguel's name into the dark. If she went into that exercise and slipped even once, the SEALs would see through her. And if they connected her to the whispers Miguel had died under, everything would unravel. The next week, the joint exercise began. Elena stood on the tarmac as a group of SEALs stepped off their transport. They carried themselves differently than regular Marines, loose but sharp, relaxed but lethal. Their eyes scanned everything. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and piercing gaze, approached Coulter. "Lieutenant Cross, SEAL Team 9. He introduced himself. Then his eyes shifted to Elena, narrowing slightly, as if sensing something off. Coulter wasted no time. "This is Vargas. She'll be attached to your team for recon support." Cross's brow furrowed. "She infantry?" "Something like that," Coulter said dryly. Elena kept her expression calm, though her pulse raced. The training was brutal. The SEALs pushed harder than Coulter ever had, running live-fire drills, underwater navigation, and simulated hostage rescues. Elena kept pace, her body screaming but her face impassive. During a combat drill, she and two SEALs were ambushed by hostiles. The SEALs returned fire immediately. Elena, unarmed again, reacted on instinct, sweeping low, disarming one enemy with a bone-crunching twist and driving him to the date. When the drill ended, she caught Cross staring at her. His eyes weren't angry. They were calculating. Later, he cornered her near the gear shed. His voice was low, clipped. "Where'd you learn that reversal?" Elena froze. "That's not Army. Not even Marine MCMAP. That's Special Operations Close Quarters. I've seen it. Hell, I've used it." She tried to deflect. "I adapt. I learn fast." Cross's gaze didn't waver. "Don't play me, Vargas. You've been trained. And whoever trained you wasn't standard issue." Her throat tightened. "Sir, I just do what's necessary." He leaned closer, his eyes drilling into hers. "I don't know who you are, but I'll find out." And then he walked away. That night, Elena sat by the fire pit alone, her journal on her lap. She didn't write. She only stared at the flames, Miguel's voice echoing in her head. The SEAL had seen through her in one drill. One mistake, and her cover was gone. She thought of Miguel's funeral again, of the nameless man who had whispered that her brother's death wasn't what it seemed. If the SEALs dug deeper, if Cross pushed harder, maybe, just maybe, the truth about Miguel would finally surface. But that truth carried danger. Because if the military had buried Miguel's mission, they wouldn't hesitate to bury her too. Elena closed her journal and looked out at the dark horizon. Her war wasn't just against the doubts of her platoon anymore. It was against the shadows that had swallowed her brother. And those shadows were watching. The exercise was supposed to be just that, training. But reality has a way of kicking down doors when least expected. 2 days into the joint operation, the base received an emergency transmission. A supply convoy, civilian contractors escorted by a Marine detail, had gone dark in a mountain pass 20 miles north. Radio silence. No movement. The terrain was hostile, littered with old smuggling routes. Intelligence suggested the possibility of rogue paramilitary groups operating in the region. Reeves briefed the team quickly. "We're sending a small detachment to investigate. Cross, you and your SEALs will lead. Coulter, you'll attach with a Marine fire team. Vargas, you're going too." Coulter opened his mouth to object, but Reeves cut him short with a glare. "This isn't up for debate. Move out." The ride out was tense. The convoy's last known location lay in a narrow canyon, flanked by sheer cliffs. Elena sat in the back of the Humvee, her rifle across her lap. She could feel Cross's eyes on her occasionally, sharp and unreadable. She ran through mental checklists. Ammo count, escape routes, improvised tactics. Her training, the training she wasn't supposed to have, hummed beneath the surface. When they reached the canyon mouth, the vehicles halted. Silence hung heavy. Even the wind seemed to still. "Something's wrong," one of the SEALs muttered. They advanced on foot. The first sign of trouble came quickly. A disabled Humvee, riddled with bullet holes, half hidden by dust. Then they saw the bodies. Marines. Contractors. Ambushed. Cut down before they had a chance. Cross gave rapid hand signals, positioning his men. Elena read them instantly. She shifted without hesitation, sliding into cover exactly where he would have wanted her. That was the moment he looked at her again, eyes narrowing with recognition. And then, the trap sprung. Gunfire erupted from the cliffs above, muzzle flashes sparking like lightning. Bullets rained down, chipping rock and dirt. "Contact front. Contact high." Cross roared. The SEALs returned fire instantly, their precision remarkable. Coulter's Marines scrambled, some panicked, some firing wildly. Elena didn't think. She moved. She darted across open ground, scooping a wounded Marine under her arm, dragging him to cover. Then she dropped prone, sighted high, and squeezed off 3 sharp shots. 2 hostiles fell from the cliffs before they even understood where she was firing from. "Who the hell?" one Marine gasped, staring at her. But Elena wasn't listening. She was in Miguel's world now. Every rock, every shadow, every flicker of motion snapped into clarity. She heard Cross shouting orders. And then, his voice cutting through chaos. "Vargas, with me." She obeyed without hesitation, moving as if they'd trained together for years. Together they bounded forward, weaving through suppressive fire, until they reached the canyon wall. From there, they scaled quickly, flanking the ambitious. The climb was brutal, bullets hissing past, but Elena's grip never faltered. Her muscles burned, her lungs screamed, but she remembered Miguel, remembered his words, "You're stronger than they think." At the top, they moved as one. Cross swept left. She swept right, clearing positions with ruthless efficiency. When the last hostile dropped, silence fell. The canyon reeked of gunpowder and blood. The survivors below looked up in shock, watching the SEAL and the supposed ordinary Marine standing side by side, rifles smoking. Cross turned to her slowly. His chest heaved, sweat dripping down his face. "You're no regular infantry," he said quietly. "Tell me the truth, Vargas. Who trained you?" Her heart thundered. She almost told him. About Miguel. About the stranger. About the blacked-out lines in the file. But before she could answer, a crackle of radio static cut in. "Base to Reeves. Priority transmission. Secondary ambush forming. Reinforcements inbound. ETA 20 minutes. Cross's jaw tightened. He gave her one last look. "Later," he muttered. "For now, we hold." The team scrambled to prepare defenses. They dragged wrecked vehicles into choke points, redistributed ammo, and treated the wounded. The tension was suffocating. Coulter stormed over to Cross, his face twisted. "You let her take point with you. She's a liability." Cross glared at him. "She just saved your Marines' lives. Twice." Coulter's lips curled. "She's hiding something. I've said it from day one." Elena remained silent, reloading magazines with steady hands. Inside, her chest ached with the weight of secrets. When the reinforcements came, they came hard. Technicals with mounted guns, insurgents flooding the canyon mouth. The air shook with explosions. The SEALs fought like demons. Marines fired until barrels overheated. Elena moved through the chaos like a ghost, shifting positions, striking at the enemy's weak points. At one point, a hostile breached the line, rushing a wounded contractor. Elena intercepted, slamming into him with bone-crunching precision, disarming and dropping him in seconds. When she looked up, she caught Coulter staring. Not with contempt this time, but with fear. Hours later, the battle ended. The canyon floor was littered with silence again, the enemy retreating into the mountains. The survivors regrouped. Exhaustion weighed heavy, but they were alive. Cross approached Elena slowly, his face grim but steady. "I've worked with some of the best operators alive," he said quietly. "Delta, DevGru, SAS. And I've never seen someone fight the way you just did. That wasn't chance. That wasn't instinct. That was training." Elena lowered her gaze. For the first time, she let the mask slip. "My brother was Miguel Vargas," she said softly. Cross froze. Elena's voice trembled but didn't break. "He was more than what the records say. After he died, someone came to me. Someone who said his death wasn't an accident. They trained me, prepared me, told me one day I'd need to finish what Miguel started." Cross's eyes darkened. He had heard the name. Everyone in special operations circles had. Miguel Vargas, brilliant, fearless, killed under unclear circumstances overseas. And what exactly did he start? Cross asked. Elena shook her head. "I don't know. Only that it cost him his life." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Cross nodded slowly. "You've got enemies in high places, Vargas. The kind that don't put things on paper. You need to be careful." From behind them, Coulter's voice cut in, cold and sharp. "So it's true. You've been lying to all of us." Elena turned. Coulter stood rigid, his face pale but burning with something between triumph and fury. "You think this ends here?" he spat. "You're a fraud. And when command hears about this, you're done." Elena met his gaze, steady and calm. For the first time, she didn't feel anger toward him. Only pity. Because Coulter saw only rules and ranks. He couldn't grasp the deeper war, the one Miguel had died in, the one she was now entangled in. Cross stepped between them, his voice iron. "She's not done. Not even close. And if you try to bury her, Coulter, you'll answer to me." Coulter stiffened but said nothing. He turned on his heel and stalked away. That night, as they evacuated the canyon, Elena sat in the back of the truck, her rifle across her knees. She stared into the darkness, her brother's voice echoing again. "You're stronger than they think." The truth about Miguel was still out there, buried, dangerous. And now, she wasn't alone in carrying it. Cross had seen her, believed in her. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of something Miguel had always wanted for her. Not just survival, but purpose. The war ahead wasn't over. In fact, it was only beginning. But Elena Vargas was ready.